Love it to the max. Brother David, are you there? Brother David Mohammed, are you there, King?
Yes, sir. I'm here and ready.
Nothing but love for you, King. So, brother, sisters, take a time now, get your pen, get a pad, because the way this brother takes you on a journey, it is unbelievable. I've got my notebook and pen right by my side, ready to learn just as much as everyone else. David, I'm handing over to you, King.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful. I bear witness that there is but one God. I thank you all for the opportunity to share some thoughts. And I have to admit, I'm a little bit moved by some of the earlier content and some of what our beloved sister shared was very impactful. And having lost my only son in this year, 2022, and then that being followed up by the loss of my father, in the midst of the ups and downs of this year, put a lot of things into perspective. And it is, in fact, having to do this presentation now bears testimony for me to having to wrestle against emotions and rocky roads, unforeseen circumstances, and obstacles and barriers that were not planned for. So we have to keep moving. We have to keep working. And I pray that on another occasion, I could have the opportunity to speak with or meet with our beloved sister. And there's just so much to say. So I'm going to get straight into this. And oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, this is going to be somewhat of a crash course, because I'm going to share some information with us that is going to, by God's grace, wake us up and prepare us for 2023. So just you know, give me a moment to settle in. Of course, a lot of this content is available in my book, Black Studies. So I'm going to start off with a quote from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan about education. The minister says, good education was given to an elite. And that elite was to rule the masses with a less quality education. And you have strata of elite, but at the top of that elite is Satan himself. Then the minister quotes President Woodrow Wilson, who said, we want a class of persons to have a liberal education, and we want another class of persons, a very much larger class of necessity, to forego the privilege of a liberal education and fit themselves to perform specific, difficult manual tasks. Right? This is the foundation for everything that's going to come after this, trust me. So when we look at the problems of the society and the problems in education, it is demonstrative of the fact that this education and the idea that undergirds it has reached its end. And as the torchlight of the civilization is going out, that fact is reflected in the degeneracy of the culture and the art form. It is reflected in the immorality, the debauchery, the lust for pleasure through drugs and sex. It is going down. The light of this world is going out. Now, the key idea here is that in society, everyone gets an education. But there are two kinds of education. One that is specifically designed for the empowerment of those who are already powerful. And two, the education or training of those who are being positioned and maneuvered ideologically to never see themselves as entrepreneurs, innovators, pioneers, real estate owners, controllers of their own destiny. They have to get an education. As a matter of fact, their education is more important than the education of the rich. Because if the rich don't get an education, they're still empowered by their culture. But if the poor don't get an education, then they would not be placed within the position at the bottom of the social ladder. Now, the wealthy are taught certain things, and the poor are taught certain things also. Let's run through the 7 principles of Kwanzaa as it is that season. Of course, unity, but in 2023, we have to unite for better and more different reasons, and more important reasons than we even had in 2022 and 2021. Self-determination. We must chart our own destiny because someone else is planning for us. Collective work and responsibility. We have to unite, settle our differences, pool our resources, open skills banks and think tanks. Cooperative economics. We must unite and build a Black economy with purpose. We must demonstrate creativity, and we have to have faith. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said in Message to the Black Man in the Keys to Economic Success, he said the first step that the so-called Negro wage earners should take is to spend only when necessary and according to their income. We have to have our economics more so like a shield than as an offensive weapon. We have to defend ourselves with our economics. We have to protect our financial freedom more than aggressively pursue with our spending. And of course, this picture just speaks for itself. We don't even have to say anything. As a matter of fact, a little secret, I went to see a movie the other day called Violent Santa. Well, I thought they killed Santa in the movie. I was wrong. That's why I went to see it. But Santa was actually killing people. Can you believe that? So the Nation of Islam says, up with Jesus, down with Santa. That's just our disclaimer for the season. Now, I'm going to reach a crescendo because I'm going to share some very important information with you. And I'm going to go at a pace, and I don't want to be too long. A lot was said today that is really moving and shaking. So we want to talk about 2023. And we want to talk about this mission of reparations, which maybe none of us would be involved in the final chapter, but our children must be. Over the last couple of weeks, we saw the story with our beloved sister, Ngozi Fulani, the head of a great charity, and what happened at the Buckingham Palace where she was assaulted by Lady Susan Hussey. We're familiar with this. The BBC reported it. It was on LBC. Repeatedly asking her where she was from and so on. We're familiar with what happened. Best friends with the Queen and all of that, right? And Buckingham Palace described the remarks as unacceptable and deeply regrettable. And even a spokesperson for Prince William said that racism has no place in our society. And it's right that the individual has stepped down. Yeah, fine. But while this was happening, so many other factors were coming to the forefront. And many people don't appreciate the issue of touching a Black person's hair, in particular a Black woman. But during enslavement, they had something called the pencil test and something called the brown paper bag test. They'd put a pencil in our hair. If it falls out, that means we had more value as either a mulatto, quadroon, or octroon that could fetch more of a price for the buyer and seller of us, as opposed to being a sambo, a metsi, or a courtesy, or a pure Black, where the pencil would stick in our hair. And feeling our hair, white people running their fingers through our hair is massively offensive. Same thing with the brown paper bag test. They put your skin color next to a brown paper bag, and depending on whether you were darker or lighter than it, that would determine your human worth. So what was it? Is it that Lady Hussey wanted to determine the value or the price that she can fetch for another African that royal family have sold so many of us? It is unacceptable, beloved. It is unacceptable for a white person to touch a Black person's hair based on that history that so many of us don't know. As a matter of fact, the only time, because I have seen it recently, the only time that a white person could get away with touching a Black person's hair, let's say my hair. The only way that a white person could touch my hair and get away with it is if we're playing football on the same team and I just scored a goal and we're celebrating and the whole team hugs up and we're in this huddle and you like touch my hair, right, fine, and leave it right there. But if you start to run your fingers, because I was looking at when Saka scored for England, not for Nigeria, for England. Oh, that's something that, there was some trauma in that whole World Cup experience too. You know, I saw the white people touching this. I was like, what's this? What's going on here? And I said, okay, all right, let them, you know, Harry Kane and the boys, all right, let them touch his head just for a couple of seconds in celebration, but don't run the fingers through it. And then all of this happening in the midst of this documentary, which some of it came across as quite historical. I mean, they were talking about the history of slavery and the history of the royal family, things that I've spoken about on the Black Agenda for years that I was shocked that they actually admitted on the Netflix documentary. And then this writer for The Sun, Jeremy Clarkson, again on the heels of the Ngozi Fulani disrespect, expressed some of the most medieval style, absolute obscene racial hatred against Meghan Markle. But you see, when these kinds of things happen, there is a road of progress that we must step towards and on and continue to journey through that can bring us some end goal. And that is reparations. See, again, there's so much that we don't know, so much that we have to understand. Don't ever forget the CARICOM 10-point plan of action for reparations. We have to put this in the minds and hearts of our children, but they must be conscious. And going back to that whole World Cup thing, let me just say something really, really quickly. Because I know a lot of our people support Argentina. I'm happy for Messi. I've been a manager of a national team, the Trinidad and Tobago national senior men's football team. I'm the longest serving manager. Been to 37 countries, over 120 matches with the senior team, almost 50 matches with the junior teams. You see, but I as a Black man cannot support Argentina. So if you do, fine. I respect you. That's your business. But in my book, Black Studies, I wrote years ago about that history of Argentina. Argentina used to be a nation that was 50% African. Now you'll hardly see an African. I went to Argentina twice. And once I spent a month there, did not see not even one Black person, except the people that I traveled with. So in Argentina, because this is current affairs now, because they just won the World Cup, throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, Black people comprised up to 50% of the population. But by 1887, the percentage of the Black population was officially calculated at 1.8%. This was due to imposed measures aimed at minimizing the Black population. There was a deliberate policy of genocide against the Afro-Argentinian, openly expressed by the president, Domingo F. Sarmiento, which was implemented by using repressive policies, epidemics, and wars as a tool of mass destruction of Africans in Argentina. Sarmiento advocated genocide as well as the decline in the Black population in reference to the Black population of his country. In 1848, this man, president of Argentina, Domingo F. Sarmiento, he said, quote, "Slavery in the United States today is without question a possible solution." He's talking about the Black people in his country at that time. He said 4 million are Black, and within 20 years, they will be 8 million. What is done with such Blacks hated by the white race? And years later, the same president, Domingo F. Sarmiento, said, "I come to this happy chamber of deputies in Buenos Aires where there are no gauchos or Black or poor." And interestingly, for the big fans of Brazilian footballer Ronaldinho, of course, his first name wasn't mentioned much, but one of his first names was Gaucho, poor and Black. Slavery was officially abolished in Argentina in 1813. However, many Blacks were still held as slaves and were only granted their freedom by fighting in Argentina's wars. During these wars, the policy of genocide against Black people was fully activated. Similar in the Dominican Republic, similar in El Salvador, who banned the immigration of African people from the 1930s all the way up to the 1980s. Same with Uruguay, who had the civil war with Argentina, where both countries sought to exterminate their Black populations. I'm sorry, I cannot support Argentina as a football team because I'm conscious of my history. I have no problem with anyone else who does. Now let's get to the essence of this. These crimes against humanity must be compensated. I'm going to pick up the pace here. This is one of your members of parliament, Member of Parliament for South Dorset, Sir Richard Drax. This man is under the spotlight for reparations. And I'm surprised as to how little this has been publicized in the United Kingdom. Because on November the 26th, the UK Guardian newspaper ran a story entitled "Barbados Plans to Make Tory MP Pay Reparations for Families Slave Past." Member of Parliament Richard Drax reported to have visited Caribbean island for meeting on next steps, including plans for former sugar plantation. Now he went there. He visited. He met with members of the Barbados government. He's a sitting member of parliament. This is happening now. The government of Barbados, according to the report, is considering plans to make a wealthy conservative MP the first individual to pay reparations for his ancestors' pivotal role in slavery. The Observer understands that Richard Drax, Member of Parliament for South Dorset, recently traveled to Barbados for a private meeting with the country's Prime Minister, Mia Mottley. A report is now before Mottley's cabinet laying out the next steps, which include legal action in the event that no agreement is reached with British Member of Parliament Richard Drax. The Drax family pioneered the plantation system in the 17th century and played a major role in the development of sugar and slavery across the Caribbean and the United States. Barbados Member of Parliament Trevor Prescott, a chairman of the Barbados National Task Force on Reparations, part of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, said the United Nations had declared slavery to be a crime against humanity. If the issue cannot be resolved, we would take legal action in the international courts. The case against the Drax family would be for hundreds of years of slavery, so it's likely any damages would go well beyond the value of the land. Countries in the Caribbean have been campaigning for the payment of reparations by former colonial powers and institutions which profited from slavery. This is the first time a family has been singled out. And I dare say, beloved, it's actually the second time that a family has been singled out. It's just that the first family that has been singled out for this is trying to pretend that they're not hearing the conversation. But they will, because there's now a Black baby born into the royal family that they will be forced to address so many of these issues. Among the plans being considered are that 17th century Drax Hall is turned into an Afrocentric museum, and that a large portion of the plantation is used for social housing for low-income Bayesian families. There is also a recommendation that Drax pays for the work, pay for all of it. David Kamiziang, our friend and brother, the Barbados ambassador to CARICOM and deputy chairman of the task force, said that besides Drax, other families whose ancestors benefited from slavery are being considered, including the British royal family. It is now a matter that is before the government of Barbados. It is being dealt with at the highest level. Drax is famously wealthy today. The Drax family is the central family in the whole story of enslavement in Barbados. They are the architects of slavery-based sugar production. They have a deep historical responsibility. The process has only just begun, and we trust that we will be able to negotiate. If that doesn't work, there are other methods, including litigation. Now, I want us to appreciate the rationale behind this. Yes, it is true that he himself never hit any Africans with a whip, but his family produced wealth from crimes against humanity that he benefited from. And it appears that he understands this, but it is the precedent that is being set because other families are involved, though not as prominently as the Draxes. The reparations journey has begun. The matter is now for the Cabinet of Barbados. It is in motion. It is being dealt with. Drax came under the spotlight in December 2020 after it was revealed he had not declared his inheritance of a 250-hectare Drax Hall plantation. He did so after official documents surfaced, which named him as the owner. Now, today, at age 64, he lives at the family's mansion in Charborough Park, Dorset. He and his family are worth at least £150 million and own 23.5 square miles in Dorset and estate and Grousemoor in Yorkshire. The family also owns 125 Dorset properties personally or through family trusts, and a 4.5 million holiday villa on nearby sandbanks. He got this from slavery. Drax's ancestor, Sir James Drax, was one of the first Englishmen to colonize Barbados in the early 17th century. He part-owned at least 2 slave ships, the Samuel and the Hope. There's only one family really that surpasses all of this by hundreds of times. The Drax family also owned a plantation in Jamaica, which they sold in the 19th century. When slavery was abolished across the British Empire in 1853, the family received over £4,000, a very large sum in 1836, in compensation for freeing 189 enslaved Africans. Member of Parliament for Barbados, Trevor Prescott, added the Drax family had slave ships. They had agents in the African continent and kidnapped Black African people to work on their plantations here in Barbados. I have no doubt that what would have motivated them was that they never perceived us to be equal to them, that we were human beings. They considered us as chattel. And here, one white man who is living and wealthy today is beginning to see the light. Now, if our children don't pick up this fight that is being led today by old people, then our justice will fall on the wayside. Now, see this here? This is my rationale for making these points. The case of 97-year-old Irmgard Furchner. Who is that? This, by the way, is in, what's today's date? Today's the 20th of December, 2022. This here is in today's newspaper. Today's newspaper, December 20th, 2022. Who is this Irmgard Furchner? She was a young lady in her 20s at the time of the Jewish Holocaust. And it's all over the news today that she now has to go to jail at 97 years old. What? Look at this lady. Wow. According to Reuters News, a 97-year-old woman who worked as a Nazi concentration camp secretary was convicted on Tuesday for her role in the murder of thousands of people in what could be one of the country's last trials for World War II crimes. The district court in the northern town of Itzho handed Irmgard Furchner a 2-year suspended jail sentence for aiding and abetting the murder of 10,505 people and the attempted murder of 5 people, a court spokesperson said. Look at this woman. Today, beloved, it is worldwide news that she was sentenced to 2 years in prison for killing 10,000 people. 10,000 people. Look at her. I hope you're feeling this and thinking about how many beneficiaries will go to jail, should go to jail, should be arrested, should be prosecuted for the crimes against humanity against African people. The Independent UK paper said she was sentenced under juvenile law owing to the fact that she was aged between 18 and 19 the time the crimes were committed. Furchner worked as a stenographer and a typist to the SS commander at the notorious concentration camp between 1943 and 1945. She was accused of being part of the accessory to the function of the camp, where she was alleged to have aided and abetted those in charge in the systematic killing of those imprisoned there. She took notes on a typewriter. 4 persons who were involved in the Jewish Holocaust. They hunted her down in her old age and said, we don't care if you didn't shoot anyone or kill anyone, stab anyone, throw any hand grenades at anyone, drop any bombs or fire any missiles or torpedoes. We don't care about that. You dared to take notes in your job? You dared to do that? You have to go to jail, even though you're 97 years old. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, when it comes to our crimes that were committed against us, that were thousands of times worse than the crimes of the Jewish Holocaust, they're telling us to move on. That was then. Forgive your enemies. It's in the past. But they will never forgive. Let's look at the case of 101-year-old Joseph S. He's past 100. 100 years old. He was a security guard at a Nazi concentration camp. The man, identified only as Joseph S. because of German privacy laws, was sentenced to 5 years in prison after being found guilty of being an accessory to more than 3,500 murders. The old lady just killed 10,000, and now this old man, 101 years old, they're saying he killed 3,500. What did he do? He was a security guard. New York Times, June 22nd, earlier this year, article by Christopher F. Schuttens. In Berlin, says a 101-year-old former concentration camp guard was convicted by a German court on Tuesday of being an accessory to more than 3,500 murders and sentenced to 5 years in prison, although it was not clear whether he would ever serve time. He'll probably be dead by the time. Let me not say that. The man who has been widely described in the German media as the oldest person ever to be tried on Nazi-era charges worked as an SS guard at their concentration camp in north of Berlin from 1942 to 1945. He denied working at the camp, and prosecutors were unable to directly link him to the deaths of the prisoners. He's still going to jail. Reading out the verdict just after 10 a.m., Judge Udo Lechterman said that the man had supported the Nazi system of terror and murder. You have willingly supported this mass destruction with your activities, the judge said. A lawyer for the man, Joseph S., said he would appeal the decision if the authorities follow through and try to send him to prison. That move would also require a declaration by a medical commission saying that his health was stable enough for confinement. Young, strong, fit, healthy men could barely take those prison conditions. You're going to send a 101-year-old security guard. And the judge is telling him, you went along with that system. What if we were to round up all the Caucasian, how many Caucasian people rebelled against slavery? You have the Quakers and the abolitionists who had differing opinions. How many of them rebelled against it? And how many living today benefited from it? We go by the simple principle that murder does not have a statute of limitations, said the judge. The office found Mr. S in 2018 after scouring concentration camp records that the Red Army had taken back to Moscow. It is what's right, and of course, it would have been what was right 70 years ago. As the perpetrators of the Holocaust grow increasingly few and old, German prosecutors and investigators are racing to bring remaining cases to court. They are racing to bring remaining cases to court. I hope this is touching you. Let's look at the case of 96-year-old Oscar Groening. Look at his age. On November 29th, 2017, the Independent reported German court rules 96-year-old bookkeeper of Auschwitz, former Nazi SS guard, must serve a 4-year prison sentence. He was a librarian. Court rules former SS guard fit to serve the term despite his advanced age, 96 years old. He was known as the bookkeeper of Auschwitz, must serve a 4-year prison sentence, a German court rule. Oscar Groening was found guilty in 2015 of being an accessory to the murders of 300,000 people at the death camp in occupied Poland. 300,000 people? A librarian? But he appealed his sentence, and until now it was not clear whether he would serve the jail time. Authorities have previously been reluctant to enforce the penalty because of his old age. Groening worked as an accountant at Auschwitz between October 1942 and September 1944, during which time he counted money and valuables taken from those who were murdered at the camp. He was also sometimes assigned to ramp duty, where he guarded the stolen possessions. Oh, there's also the case of 96-year-old Harry S. The BBC reported on March 10, 2021, Stutthof camp Holocaust guard Harry S. found unfit to stand trial at age 96. A court in Germany has declared a 96-year-old former Nazi camp guard unfit to stand trial, but ruled that he should pay his own legal fees. The man named as Harry S. was accused of complicity in the murder of several hundred people at Stutthof camp. The court said there was a high degree of probability that he was guilty of the crimes. Several hundreds of people. He didn't kill as much as the old lady who killed 10,000, or the security guard who killed 300,000. He is one of 3 recent cases related to the Stutthof camp, which was located in then Nazi-occupied Poland. Oh, it's heavy. And then this is the last one I'll go through. Case of 93-year-old Bruno Day. Again, he was given a 2-year prison sentence, which was suspended last July after being found guilty of complicity in the murder of more than 5,000 prisoners. And there's so much more, so many more. And all of this is taking place today. It's the here, it's the now. This man, Julius Stretcher, was the first to be hunted down. 1 year after World War II was over, they caught him and they executed him. He had a publishing company, multi-millionaire. But because he simply went along with what was happening, didn't kill anyone, but he's the first case that was killed in the relentless pursuit of those who were culpable, guilty, directly involved, indirectly involved, supported, sympathized with, did not fight against Nazi Germany. All of them have to be prosecuted and brought to justice. But what about with the African Holocaust? Oh, why is DigiCell? Is this a sponsored program? No, it's not. But like DigiCell in 2022 also took up the reparations discussion. This is Dennis O'Brien, founder and chairman of Digicel. On July 19th this year, he made an announcement of what he referred to as the repair campaign. Now, Digicel is the #1 mobile service provider in the entire Caribbean, all over, from Jamaica all the way down to Trinidad and Guyana. He announced a plan to deliver reparations for slavery to Caribbean countries. Digicel said, the aim is for European colonizing countries to create an investment funding arrangement for each country affected by slavery. According to Jamaica Loop News, July 25th, Dennis O'Brien revealed the plan while delivering the keynote address at Canto 2022 at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami. Called the Repair Campaign, the fund will be used to promote major projects in agriculture, health, and education, among other sectors, over 25 years. He said, slavery is a crime, a high crime against heaven, and its annihilation ought not to be postponed. Look at all of the pieces of this puzzle. Look at all of this that's happening simultaneously. All of this is 2022. A member of parliament, Richard Drax from England, is admitting, yes, my family had something to do with slavery, and I'm willing to have a discussion with governments of Caribbean nations on how I can pay reparations. The #1 cell phone company in the Caribbean, Digicel, is saying, all right, we're gonna launch some campaign. Meanwhile, you have the royal family, who are the most guilty of them all, because in the year 1663, they registered a business called the Royal Trading Africa Company that was established to human traffic enslaved Africans, and they incorporated their business for 1,000 years up to the year 2663, according to Dr. Eric Williams in Capitalism and Slavery. And this is happening around the same time that you have a Black woman entering the royal family and all of the snakes and ghosts of racism rearing their heads once again, forcing the discussion for justice and reparations on the table once again. And there's nothing that can be done to stop that except if we don't educate our children. And if they still don't have a rationale for justice to ensure that people of African descent receive the compensation that is owed to us, just look at what's happening with the Jews. And the relentless pursuit to non-stop hunt down with every fiber of legal acumen and the intelligence and wisdom of the attorneys, the judges, the magistrates, the lawyers, to go into the history books and find out who was present during the Jewish Holocaust and capture them one by one and bring them to justice. All of that's happening around the same time as these conversations for reparations. These are our ancestors on these ships. And even going back to the last few years and looking at how Europe got its wealth from Africa, there have been even other institutions that have accepted their culpability. This is the University of Glasgow in Scotland, who admitted that they themselves became a powerful educational institution from slavery. And they agreed to pay 20 million British pounds in reparations to atone for their historical links to the transatlantic slave trade. They did their own research. And in them doing their own research about the existence of their own institution, came to the conclusion that they benefited up to, with the tune of 200 million British pounds in today's money from slavery. And they said, no, we have to give something back. And they're giving back approximately just 1/10, which is 20 million British pounds. Other British universities, including Oxford and Bristol, have been the focus of protests over their ties to the slave trade and to the powerful colonists such as Cecil Rhodes. This is Oxford University. In 2017, All Souls College at Oxford launched an annual scholarship for Caribbean students and paid a £100,000 grant to a college in Barbados in recognition of its funding from Christopher Codrington, a wealthy slave owner who bequeathed £10,000 in 1710 to build a library that bears his name, Codrington College. Do you know that that is where they trained the Anglican priests? This is All Souls College, Oxford. The Glasgow Agreement was first signed in Kingston, Jamaica on July 31st, 2019 by Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, who said it was a bold moral and historical step. Glasgow University played a key role in the abolitionist campaign of the era, but until recently, Scotland's profiteering from slavery, including from tobacco and cotton plantations, was largely ignored. And then you have Robert Cunningham Graham, who spent 2 decades making his fortune as a slave owner. Graham Campbell, a Scottish National Party councillor who became the city's first Black descendant in 2017 as a councillor, welcomed the agreement. He said, "Our mutual recognition of the appalling consequences of that past and indictment of Scottish inhumanity over centuries towards enslaved Africans are the justifications that are at the root of the modern day racism that we fight now." And it not just goes into Glasgow University, All Souls, Oxford University, universities in Bristol, but there are so many other institutions and even images. But the crimes against humanity that have been committed by the royal family is the pinnacle of them all. And with all of the visits to St. Vincent and Jamaica and Belize of members of the royal family who met protests and calls for reparation and now being forced into discussions about historical justice being restored, we are at a turning point in our history that if we continue in 2023 to be as relentless in our pursuit of justice against these tyrants who, once you in 2023 agree to hold on to the wealth that was stolen from Africa, just by the fact that you as a child or grandchild of that last queen, who in 1952, when she became the Queen of England, while she was in Kenya, while they were committing crimes against humanity, against African people, including against President Barack Obama's grandfather, who was tortured when they electrocuted him through his testicles. And you stole wealth through that whole period. And now your offspring are holding on to that wealth. Then you're just as culpable. In fact, no, you're much more culpable than these 90-something and 100-year-old plus Jews who are now being hunted down and made to go to jail. You're worse than them, much worse than them. And all of these other factors are showing up even more truths. Still a statue of William Beckford. Jamaica in the 18th century was described by Charles Leslie as a constant mine whence Britain draws prodigious riches. Contributed greatly to the wealth of individuals thousands of miles away, such as William Beckford, Lord Mayor of London. Slave owner, his statue goes up. Lord William Beckford was the owner of well over 1,000 enslaved Africans. His statue still graces Guildhall in London. Slave owners who they celebrate. England was the greatest slave trader in the Atlantic world during the 18th century, human trafficking millions of us. And this goes on and on and on. And we have the history of all of these slave owners, slave traders, those who benefited. Of course, we saw the case of Edward Colston, whose statue was taken down during the Black Lives Matter protests from 1680 to 1692. It's estimated that his company transported around 84,000 Africans, of whom 19,000 died in the Middle Passage alone. And on June 7, 2020, his statue was removed in Bristol and dumped in the harbor. There was Robert Milligan, again, statue up, but the local government authorities were smart. Robert Milligan, who was in Jamaica in the 1700s, owned over 500 enslaved Africans, but the City Hall authorities, they said, look, they took down Edward Colston, they defaced the statue of Winston Churchill, they're coming for him next, let's take him down now to avoid the indignity. The founder of the Scouts, Baden Powell, racist, slave owners, they defaced his statue. And there were so many others like him, of course, Christopher Columbus, one of the biggest war criminals of them all. Statues of Christopher Columbus have been coming down all over. This one was beheaded. Of course, we have the history. All of this is in Black Studies, my book, which is available on the website, www.blackagendaproject.com. So the verdict on Christopher Columbus, and I'll close with him, is that based on the historical evidence, diary entries, and first-hand accounts of colleagues present at the time, that Christopher Columbus is hereby guilty of the crimes of unlawful invasion and occupation of foreign lands, rape, religious intolerance and persecution, kidnapping, torture, unlawful and unjustified waging of war, casual executions of children, first and second degree murder of at least 15 million people, manslaughter, enslavement, lying in the name of the Spanish crown, breaking up families, and genocide. He's guilty. The royal family are, for the least, culpable, but guilty. And the system, in the face of all of this truth, still tolerates post-colonialism, but it's for ourselves and our offspring, our generations to follow, to put all of these truths as a first priority and ensure that we can get the justice that we deserve. 2023 is the time. Too much has happened in 2022 for us to go to sleep in 2023. And I want to take the opportunity to congratulate our beloved brother, Andrew Muhammad, and colleagues and friends in establishing the Black Parents Association. It's really a Black Parents Teachers Association because the parents do so much teaching. And this is some of the teaching that we have to be doing. But I'm telling you, we have to network within the education system, within the school system, within the culture, have our own positive hidden curriculum, and make sure that by the time that we get to this date in 2024, we'll be unstoppable. So I want to thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for listening. And may Almighty God continue to bless us all. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.
Alaikum salam. Well done, King. Thank you, sir. Thank you for that delivery and that history lesson and showing us a little pathway to where a lot of the wealth of these people comes from. And it's on our backs. That's why when it comes to immigration and certain things, we should have no apologies in terms of being over in this country and feeling like they're doing us a favor. we built this. It's on our forefathers' blood and guts, which made this and this country rich. Put the ones in the group. If you're feeling Brother David, make sure you put the ones. Show the fire. Pure fire. Pure fire. David, that was beautiful as always. Good delivery and taking us on a lesson and showing us what's going on and where things have come from and how, when it comes to certain people, they will not rest. You could be near on 100 years old. You will still do your time, especially when it goes against a certain type of people. We don't even need to say who, but look at our people. When we get victimized, where's the justice? Family, if you have a question, put the question in questions. David, can you answer a few questions?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
All right, family, if you have any questions, fire away. Fire away. Any questions? I'm not seeing that. We good?
I'm just seeing ones.
Please put your questions in the Q&A box. There was someone with their hand raised. If you go to the website, sis, you'll see.
I can see one. Sorry, sis. I've got one question. If they stop the debt, Brother David,
Yes.
they're saying if they stop the debt to Africa, would that be a start?
Oh, well, first of all, debt cancellation is point number 9 in the 10-point plan of action for reparations established by CARICOM on March the 11th, 2014. Of course, the 10 points are first a full formal apology, then repatriation, the establishment of an indigenous peoples program, cultural institutions, the African public health crisis, illiteracy eradication, psychological rehabilitation, then African knowledge program, debt cancellation, and the transfer of modern technology. So cancellation of debt that was incurred as a result of the establishment of structural adjustment systems that impoverished us simply by the relationship that we had with the so-called first world, that cancellation within itself was accrued under an unjust system. So, of course, it's one of the 9 policies, one of the 10 policies, number 9 of the 10 policies. So it's not a bad thing, but it's only a teardrop in the ocean in comparison to the justice that's required.
Beautiful, beautiful answer. There's another question, brother. What about all the Nazi scientists that went to USA and Russia? Why were they not pursued?
Not just USA and Russia, but also Argentina and other places. And some, of course, were powerful, because when you read Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, Volume 1, published by the Historical Research Department of the Nation of Islam, and also Book 2, for that matter, it shows how those with power were able to escape from culpability and prosecution. And you'll notice some of the kinds of roles that were played by some of the 90-year-olds and 100-year-olds that are involved: librarians, security guards, typists, accountants, persons who would have really played a minor role. You hardly hear about the scientists, even the publisher of the newspaper, who was the first one to be executed for his part. So I think power and influence, especially getting involved in international banking and that kind of protection that some enjoyed, would have earned them freedom from prosecution.
Beautiful. Thank you, King. Another question from Sister Anne-Marie. So I didn't say the names of the question before. You have to excuse me.
No problem.
Sister Anne-Marie, what plan of action can we take to prepare ourselves for reparations?
Right. So, of course, there are so many different versions of responses to that question, but we have more or less agreed with the 10-point plan of action, which has come out of CARICOM, which I just mentioned probably before the sister asked the question. And we can organize ourselves to pursue different elements or themes of the reparations program. Our organization in particular is looking at the African Knowledge Program, illiteracy eradication, and psychological rehabilitation. Those are educational. But we also have, for example, a lot of agricultural initiatives that would deal with point number 5, the public health crisis. Then our economists would look at debt cancellation, which was raised there. And then we also have those in science and technology who would look at the transfer of modern technology, which was point number 10. The historians would look at repatriation and maybe a full formal apology. And maybe the engineers and architects could look at the establishment of cultural institutions and indigenous peoples programs. So it's a very vast, diverse, complete set of responses that are required for repatriatory justice. And we don't all have to look at the exact same tasks, but we can take a united, coordinated approach to dealing with them together.
Beautiful. Thank you, brother. Hold on, there's another question. Let's see who's this now. How can Jamaica, JA, work, and the question from DD, how can JA work towards reparations and have royals as the head of state? Good question.
Well, you know, I'll tell you something that I only realized quite recently. And that is Jamaica were on the threshold of becoming a republic for their 50th anniversary of independence on August the 6th, 2012. And as a matter of fact, I interviewed the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on March 24th, 2012. And in that interview, we were outlining the countries that had become republics, which are only 4 so far. Guyana in 1970, Trinidad and Tobago in 1976, and Dominica in 1978. And the minister said, and of course, Jamaica now in 2012. So the decision really was already taken up to that point, because Minister Farrakhan was a special guest of Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller and the PNP government. But somewhere between that period, between March and August, the decision was reversed. And even former Prime Minister PJ Patterson had lamented over that. But then here comes Barbados, literally out of nowhere. And on November 30th, 2021, barely a year now, they became a republic. And they did so on their Independence Day, which is what Dominica did. So St. Vincent and the Grenadines also, about 15 years ago, 17 years ago, in fact, had a referendum where the people decided on whether or not they want to become a republic. Apparently it was turned down. And Bermuda, beautiful Bermuda, also had a referendum in 2008 to decide on whether or not they want to become independent. Because even if they became independent, chances are they would resist becoming a republic right away, but even they turned it down. So there's a consciousness that is required among the people, and an appreciation and understanding of what being a republic really means in comparison to being independent. And I think if there is an enlightenment and educational campaign throughout the Caribbean as to what this represents, I think we will see a much more swift accessing of our Republican status in addition to our independence.
Beautiful. Thank you, David. David, I've got 3 more questions. If you can
Yeah.
answer these ones quickly. Sorry to be not quickly, just so I can keep to the time. I don't want Andrew on my case. There's 3 questions. I'm going to give you them 4 now, and just answer them as brief as possible, if that's okay, sir. Slave owners' families were paid slave compensation up to 2015. How can we get that back for the Black community? That's from Kaz Ryla. The next one is, you want to answer that one first? Or
okay, yeah. So Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana received the highest payouts, 52 British pounds per person. Most of the other Caribbean islands received 25 British pounds per head, which went to the owners of the enslaved Africans. And yes, it is true that that was extracted through some kind of taxation system, which ended only the other day in 2015. All of that must be part of the mandatory calculations for that part of the reparations repayment. And it can be done, and it can be done in a very simple way. Yep.
Perfect. And the next one is from Brian Bailey. What would a satisfactory reparations look like regarding economic and other impact to Europeans? Similar to what you just said.
To Europeans,
yes.
for as long as they believe in the continuation of a monarch that was established on slave labor and the stealing, the theft of wealth from Africa, then for as long as they see that as a legitimate institution, it will be very difficult for them to have any appreciation whatsoever for what reparations means.
Perfect. All right. I know I've seen a couple more questions, but I'm only going to answer one more. Has any of the European governments looked at the policies of CARICOM for reparations, and have any responded to it? This is the last question, please, Dee.
Right. Well, on an official level, there has not been a acceptance of liability as yet. This is why a full formal apology is point number one in the reparations plan. Once that comes, then it would more likely trigger off a cascading effect for the acknowledgement of the others. The royal family are very measured and censored and edited in anything that they say about slavery, because they never say and have not yet said, we are sorry for what we did to you. They're more likely to say, we're sorry for what happened, or it is regrettable and it should be condemned. But that first step, a full formal apology, is still required.
Yes, sir. All right, there's a couple more questions, but I'm going to have to leave so we can finish on time. Brother David, thank you, thank you, thank you.
My pleasure.
As always, and take care, King, as always. One love. So family, we're going to wrap up now. I'm going to be handing over to Samira. But family, as we say, try and make sure. Brother David, love you like cooked food, brother. Love that. We got to make sure we try and support a Black business at all times. Try and make sure we look to where we can support others. If you see someone doing their business and you can advise them, try and offer your expertise. If you see them doing it wrong, try and give them some encouragement and constructive criticism, as opposed to just an attack. And let's try and make sure we can work together as a team, as a collective, so we can get more done. On that note, Sister Samira, are you there? Selector.
I am. Thank you ever so much to all of our guest speakers today. We have learned so much from a holistic perspective about us from the past and the present, and how we can all move forward together for a better and prosperous future for us as Black African people.